Walk me through like some of your overall entrepreneurial journey stories. Like, where did you get started? How did this even become a thing? Like, how did you get into being an entrepreneur in the first place? Like, what was it from you when you went to protect your sister to becoming an entrepreneur? What was that journey?
That's interesting. It's very good research that you did. Not very many people know that one. I think I never intended to be an entrepreneur. Like it was never my goal. And I think, I grew up in a relatively poor household. I grew up in Georgia and Texas, and we just didn't have a lot of money. There's 10 kids. My dad, might have made $30,000 to $50,000 a year in the early days. He makes a little bit more later, and so we just didn't have a lot of money. And so security became like instilled in me. Like when I go out on my own, I need to have security. And so what I got kind of enamored by with my first job, with Convergys, and then when I got recruited to work for Microsoft and other big tech companies, was like, hey, this is security. I have a full-time job. I'm doing fun and interesting things. I have benefits. I've got stock. I've got security. And what it kept, so I was in my mid-30s. It happened all throughout my career. I kept every company, I kept bumping into this tension where I wanted to move faster. I wanted to do things differently and more innovative than the system that I was inside of. And eventually, in all of those cases, I ended up parting ways with these companies because I just got frustrated because I couldn't move and I couldn't do what I wanted to do. And so one day my wife said, I think this was when I was like 35, so 12 years ago. My wife said, hey, why don't you just go work for a startup? It's clear that you have enormous amount of frustration with these big tech companies. So just go pick a startup. And so then I was like, okay, I'll give it a go. And so I joined Postmates in the early days, and it was growing 10% per week, which is insane. And I drank from the fire hose for almost 2 years with Postmates. And it was like a PhD education because Postmates was so fast. It's not your normal startup. And so I just learned a ton. But what I loved about it,
when she didn't see you for 2 straight years, did she think that was actually good? She pushed you to go do that?
Well, she did say, I was like, well, you didn't have to choose like the highest velocity startup.
I know, that's exactly what you should choose, arguably. If you're getting into it, go get that full education.
But I mean, I learned so much from that. Probably the best 2 years of education that I've had in my career. And what I loved about it was every day it was a different problem. Every day it was like consistently solving problems, figuring out value, optimizing. It was just like this constant movement. And I have autism, and so I tend to be like really focused on like, how do you solve these big problems, move fast, iterate, move fast, go, 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 go. And so it really fed that part of my brain, which takes in massive amounts of information, deciphers it fairly quickly, comes up with a solution and execute, right? And so I was like, okay, this startup life is for me. And so then I went up to a couple other different startups after Postmates to learn different viewpoints. I went to a gaming startup, Kabam, which sold to Netmarble for $1 billion. And then I was like, well, why don't I start my own? So that's when I started Officium, my second startup. But that's when I got the courage after the first one folded. I was like, well, let me go after this now that I've learned all of it.
It was the idea in that case, once again, like you've learned all these things and you want to see if you can do it yourself. Was it like chip on your shoulder or?
Not necessarily chip on the shoulder. It was more of like, hey, do I bet on myself and the accretive value that I bring to my life is 10x or 20x? Or do I keep betting on somebody else who gets to take all that value for themselves? Right. And then do I have full control over my ideation, my execution, what we do, right? And so that's what it was about. And so, so I started Officium. I had an idea. I took it to market. We were profitable in a month. Like I said, we went from 0 to 22 in 2 years. And then I was like, this is fantastic. And so then I started thinking about, well, what's next? What's the next thing as I helped the acquiring company, grow up post Officium?
So why even sell if it was growing that fast? What made you decide to sell?
Well, it was interesting. So I have a lot of advisors, and this is 2021. And all of my advisors said, this is the year to sell. They said, if you don't sell this year, you're probably not going to be able to sell till 27 or 28. They were spot on. And so I was like, I said, okay, I'm going to sell. And I probably got the highest value that I'd get at that point with the sell. And then I kind of hung out for a couple of years, figured things out. And I was like, oh, what do I want to do next, right? And so that's when I got into the e-commerce business with Linda's. And then when I saw that problem with Linda's, with the ad tech acquisition, LTV piece. And I was like, okay, then I'll create Foresight, solve the Linda's problem. And then I went through that whole process that I outlined earlier before I created Foresight, and so forth. And then I created Quemby, which is a gaming AI tech thing, which we haven't talked about. But again, it's all about building, scaling, innovating, and just learning.